What's going on, man? Welcome back to the basement. I'm Ron, and the first video I put out this offseason was me going through my top 24 players for fantasy football, but that was June 2nd. Today is July 14th, and something that I pride myself on in this space is that I'm always water and fluid when it comes to fantasy football takes. It is a long offseason. We are doing research. We are reading the tea leaves on news reports and injuries and practice reps and off the field issues. There are a million things happening all at once. And if I just gave a set of rankings in June and stuck to these are my guys, my targets, my fades, and remained stubborn throughout the offseason, that's just not good process. I want to be always improving, doing more research, reading more news, getting more updates, looking at different perspectives when it comes to these players. So today I'm going to talk about these 7 players skyrocketing up my rankings since I dropped this video on June 2nd. So pretty much over the last month, I have done a few rankings updates over on the Patreon, and these are the players that keep on climbing. Now, they aren't climbing so much per se because of, say, Rashee Rice is out of jail and good to go, or off the field issues, or positive injury news. This is more me looking deeper into the analysis, the research, and saying, you know what? I was too low on these guys. I did some drafts, and we need to move them up in the rankings. Pretty much these are players that I have changed my mind on a month and a half into the redraft fantasy football cycle. That was a long-winded way of saying these are 7 players moving up the rankings. As always, if you enjoy, leave a like, subscribe if you're new. And the first player moving up the rankings is James Cook. He goes from my 112 to my 109. Of course, as always, if you want to see my rankings, if you want to use them on Underdog, you can find them over on Patreon, patreon.com/Ron Stewart. I just pushed out a new update a few days ago. Now, back in June, James Cook was 112. In my most recent update, I moved him up 3 spots to the 109. And here's why. Again, it's not because of camp news or injury news. This is just the more drafts I do, the more research I do, the more I want to be all in on James Cook. It's very simple. He's getting drafted right now as the RB6. He finishes the RB6 in points per game last year, and that feels like his floor. Like, I can't see outside of an injury a world where James Cook isn't a top 6 running back in points per game. He plays on a good team, and he's a good player. That is the mantra that Josh Norris over at Yahoo newly named their channel, Josh and Hayden. They're great. You guys know I've been over there a bunch. They've been over here. And when it comes to James Cook, he embodies that. The good player on a good team. This is the Buffalo Bills. We look here at the implied points per game. By the way, I checked out a new updated source. RotoWire just did the look-ahead lines where they looked on, I believe, one of the sports books. They looked at what each team was implied for. The Bills are 6th in implied points per game. That's just in terms of what their offense is projected to score on a weekly basis. And then they have the 6th best offensive line. So you're talking about James Cook, who was the rushing yards leader last year, the RB6 in points per game. He was 2nd in rushing yards over expected per attempt, 2nd in success rate, 2nd in yards per carry, despite having the 3rd most rush attempts. So even on high volume, he remained efficient. He was 3rd in missed tackles forced, 8th in chunk rate. Awesome player, awesome situation. Now, I think that why people are a little bit not out on James Cook. He's a 1-2 turn pick, but they're not enthusiastic to take him, as it feels like he's tapped out at the 17.8 points per game he was at last year. What more can he do? He rushed for 1,600 yards. He scored double-digit touchdowns. What more can he do? And what I would say is there's a receiving ceiling, I believe, that is untapped with James Cook, and he has the upside to hit it to the same degree that all of these 1-2 turn backs have the upside for Saquon having the upside to bounce back in the Eagles offense. Same thing with Kenneth Walker, the upside to be the bell cow for the Chiefs. I think with James Cook, everyone's like, oh, he's just going to be what he was last year. But I think he has the upside to earn back that receiving role he had back in 2023. We look at 2023, 44 catches, 445 receiving yards, 4 touchdowns that year. He was a monster through the air in a 2023 season where he didn't even start the year as the lead running back. He kind of took off down the stretch, and it looked like, oh, going into year 3, he's going to challenge for 60-plus catches. And it just never happened. Now, despite low volume, he's still been great. He's had 9 receiving touchdowns since he entered the league. That was the 7th most in the NFL among running backs. His 9 yards per reception is 3rd best over that span. He just needs the targets and the routes. His targets per route run is fine at 18%. That's about average for a running back. And then He was only 19th among running backs last year with 100 less routes than Jahmyr Gibbs and just 2 designed targets on screens, 44th among running backs. So just a 0 in the passing game. And I just think that is going to revert back at some point when we just kind of rewind to what he was in college. I know that we're far removed from this, but he still is built like this. He is still a 199-pound, 5'11 back who looks like Jahmyr Gibbs, right? A pass-catching specialist. Even at Georgia, in my model, I look at year 2 running backs sorted by yards per out run. It is Joe Mixon, and then it's James Cook with a 1.95 career yards per out run on a Georgia team that he won a national championship with that had guys like George Pickens and Brock Bowers and A.D. Mitchell. And did I say George Pickens? All these guys who come through, Ladd McConkey. But you get what I'm saying. Georgia is Georgia, and he was a highly efficient receiver as a running back. Now, why I bring that up is because that is his archetype, and yet when we look at what his receiving production has been, over the last 2 years, he's been treated like prime Nick Chubb, and it makes no sense. This is a receiving back out of school, and it just gets more puzzling the more that I look at it. We go back to 2023, if you remember. Dorsey was the offensive coordinator. They lose to the Broncos. They fired Dorsey. Joe Brady's the OC for the second half of the 2023 season. He's been the OC in 2024, 2025. Now he's the head coach heading into 2026. Well, if we look back in 2023, he juiced James Cook's receiving role once he took over the reins of the offense. He had him on a 63 target pace, way more than he's ever given James Cook over the last 2 years. You can see all of his, first read share, ADA, all of that jumped with Joe Brady, even with Ty Johnson on the roster, because that's what everyone's going to say. Well, Ty Johnson's here now. They have Ray Davis. But still, James Cook is their best, most explosive option out of the backfield, and a team that keeps throwing second-round picks at whether it's Keon Coleman or DJ Moore, and they're looking for juice in the passing game. Why not throw the ball to James Cook? It makes no sense that he's been at 1.9 receptions per game in 2024 and 2025 combined. But I think now, with Joe Brady getting promoted to head coach, and yes, he's still going to call the offense, but it's going to be more of a collaborative effort in terms of the offensive game plan. He now has to care about the defense and special teams and the entire team, and he brings on Pete Carmichael as his offensive coordinator, somebody who worked with Sean Payton from 2006 to 2023, right? All of the Darren Sproles, Pierre Thomas, Mark Ingram, even Alvin Kamara, and then he's been with Sean Payton over the last 2 years with the Broncos in 2024 and 2025. I have to assume that once these two start collaborating, that Pete Carmichael is going to say, maybe we should throw that guy the football. I know it's crazy to say, but I think it's literally that simple. And if we got a season where James Cook could challenge for 50-plus catches, 60-plus catches, he can all of a sudden, in this offense, with this offensive line, with this touchdown upside, go toe-to-toe with guys like Jahmyr Gibbs and Bijan Robinson, who are getting picked at the 101 and the 102. We're already getting reports here from Chris Brown, Bills, essentially just hinting that because of Pete Carmichael, we could see more receptions for James Cook. It seems like Bills fans are calling for this as well. And I just think it's one of those secret upside, trap doors that nobody's really thinking of. It's not like James Cook is a year 2 breakout candidate or anything crazy, but there is absolutely 20-plus point per game upside if James Cook can catch some footballs, and that's always been his forte until the last 2 seasons. So I think that we could absolutely see that, and it's why I want to be ahead of market on James Cook. Similar deal with Amarian Hampton. He was my 207, a guy that in that first video I was a bit squeamish about, right? Where he had an up and down rookie year. He was injured. He had one game where he just went off against some bad defenses. I believe it was the Giants his rookie year where he just had an absolute blow-up game versus them. And then if you rostered him, you remembered it was a frustrating experience, right? Najee Harris tears his Achilles, and it's like, all right, it's wheels all the way up for Amarian Hampton. I looked through his game logs here. 8.1 points in week 1, 3.5 in week 2. He did have 24.9 PPR points versus the Denver Broncos. And then, of course, he does shred the Giants. But then outside of that, it's up and down. He's getting hurt. But I just think you have to kind of see the upside with Amarian Hampton. We already covered it a bunch with Ryan Heath in our new play callers on new offenses video with Mike McDaniel going to the Chargers. I implore you to check it out. I think it's one of the better videos I've ever done. But you can see, after talking with Ryan, after kind of doing my own research, I've only drafted him 2.4% of the time. My mission for the rest of this draft season will be to get that Amarian Hampton percent drafted number to 10% plus. Now, of course, this is over on Underdog. If you want to make sure you're drafting Amarian Hampton over there, if you want to use my rankings, you can find that on the Patreon, patreon.com/Ron Stewart. Use promo code Ron. And when you play $5, you will get $50 to use on the site. I'll have links to that in the description and the comment section down below. I should be doing a draft stream sometime this week. If this video goes up Tuesday nights, I'm thinking Wednesday or Thursday we'll go live and do a draft stream. Make sure you hop in there. But with Amari and Hampton, it's just a matter of zooming out, right? This offense is really good. The Chargers are projected for the 13th most points, the 10th best offensive line. You look at what this offense was with Joe Alt last year. They were third in EPA per play per Bill Barnwell here, and then they were 26th without him. So now we get Joe Alt healthy. We get Rashawn Slater healthy. You get Mike McDaniel slotted in here, where if we look at the chart that we were talking through with Ryan Heath, Mike McDaniel's in the upper right quadrant in terms of fantasy points per game and volume per game to the running back position. It's really as simple as draft the Chargers running backs. I even think there's meat on the bone for Keaton Mitchell and Kamani Vidal. I think all of these guys, you can draft them. And with Amari and Hampton, yes, it feels expensive, but you're paying for the year 2 breakout. We look at, again, a Ryan Heath graphic here. The fantasy performance by career year 2, year 1 to year 2, is the biggest jump that a running back can make. I think we could see Amari and Hampton have, honestly, untapped upside that's like almost unmatched. Like, there's some names that you can throw out in terms of some of the best fantasy seasons of all time. They came in year 2 for these running backs. I believe the CJ2K season was year 2. 2016 David Johnson was a year 2 season. 2010 Arian Foster was his second season. Jonathan Taylor, his RB1 season in 2021, that was his second season. CMC in 2018. There are multiple RB1 overall seasons that happen when a player is in their second season as a running back. I'm not saying that Amari Hampton is going to be the RB1 overall. I'm just saying that there is a ceiling here that maybe isn't super obvious. This is a player with a ton of pedigree, first-round pick. In my prospect model, he is the 9th best running back since 2017. His comps are Dalvin Cook, Travis Etienne, Breece Hall, Bijan Robinson. Super, super solid. 6 foot, 220 pounds, 4.4 speed. Can catch passes, can do it all out of UNC. And that's just kind of what is so impressive about him is he has this workhorse profile. He had the 7th most receptions per game last year at 3.6. And he joined Derrick Henry, Josh Jacobs, and Ashton Genty as the only running backs with 80% or more of their teams inside the 5 attempts when he was on the field. So when he was on the field, he got all the goal line work. He was getting receiving work. He wasn't coming off the field with plenty of games over a 75% snap share. I'll forgive the early bumps in the road, the efficiency dips, all of that. Year 2 breakout attached to Mike McDaniel in this offense. I'll pay whatever the market is asking me to pay because I just think that it's worth seeing how this plays out. My third player rising up the ranks is Emeka Egbuka, going from my 405 to my 310. I'm moving up 7 spots here. And I started this year kind of conservative on Egbuka, right? You guys know me. I loved him in Dynasty. I loved him in the redraft season last year. We were all over him. We were victory lapping like crazy through 5 weeks. And then he fell off. But I've kind of reevaluated things from going from, let's just keep it measured. Let's just stay in market with ADP. You know, he's a year 2 breakout candidate, but Godwin's there. There's new coaches involved here. Was Egbuka just kind of a flash in the pan, and now he's not so great. But this is now somebody I just want to be on. This is somebody I want on my teams. I want to make a target. We loved him as a rookie. He was my prospect model as wide receiver 2 coming out of that draft. I know that everyone has kind of saw it as, Egbuka's a tier below Tedero, McMillan, and Travis Hunter up top. For me, I had him in the same tier as those guys as a prospect. He comes out of Ohio State. He had multiple productive seasons next to NFL caliber players like Marvin Harrison Jr. and even Jeremiah Smith, who's a monster, Carnell Tate as well. These Ohio State guys, they more often than not are awesome. Egbuka was also a 5-star recruit. He just has all the pedigree in the world. Really, really awesome player. And I do just think through 5 games, this is an elite list to be a part of. It is Puka Nacua, Randy Moss, Egbuka, Malik Neighbors, Jamar Chase for most PPR points ever through a wide receiver's first 5 games. That is throughout the entire span of football history. Even during that stretch, his per out stuff was good. It wasn't a fluky production profile. This is the Rookie Receiver Report. If you guys are new here, make sure you're subscribed. During the season, this is my favorite piece of content to make where we track all of the rookie receivers and running backs and tight ends. You just kind of keep track of how they're doing. But a 21.2% targets per out run, that's great. 2.49 yards per out run is absurd. 9.5% first downs per out run is a little bit lower, but still a fine range to be in. And he was tied with Tedero McMillan for the best PFF grade. Now, of course, he craters after then, finishes outside the top 24 in points per game. And I hate to just be like, there was injuries, but that's kind of what I'm going with here. We have Deepak Chona saying Emeka Egbuka suspect week 6 hamstring, had a real hit on 2025. Pre-injury, he was the wide receiver 3, post-wide receiver 43. In terms of post-injury, he was the wide receiver 43. Also coincided with Baker drop-off and injuries. Project a rise in 2026. And we can see from this new quarterback show Baker Mayfield is banged up as well. Through 5 weeks, Baker was the QB3 with a 21.3 points per game. Ibuka was the wide receiver 3 at 20.5 points per game. Baker finished outside the top 12 quarterbacks. Ibuka finished outside the top 24 wide receivers. The whole offense collapsed. Everybody got banged up. If you guys remember Ibuka, I remember being like super sad. Week 6 happens. He injures his hamstring. And it's like, well, Ibuka's going to be out the next 4 weeks. And then he just plays the next week, kind of like fought through it. And I think it really did hurt his season. He just didn't look right the rest of the way. And I want to bet on Ibuka as a year 2 breakout candidate. I know that year 3 is very much in vogue right now. We had JSN last year. And then, of course, you had Brian Thomas, Ladd McConkey. All of these guys let you down in year 2. But that doesn't mean historically that year 2 wide receivers aren't good. Since 2019, we have had 19 year 2 wide receivers hit 16 plus points per game. 16 points per game would have been the wide receiver 9 last year. You've had Josh Gordon, OBJ, Jamar Chase, Justin Jefferson, Hakeem Nicks, Allen Robinson, AJ Green, Juju Smith-Schuster. Juju Smith-Schuster was like, you guys, I don't know how long you guys have been in the fantasy space for, but Juju was the poster boy for the year 2 breakout. He was a monster. Of course, the rest of his career goes the way it did. But he was one of those guys. AJ Brown, DK Metcalf, Amon-Ra St. Brown in year 2. Why not Emeka Ibuka? He goes to the Zach Robinson offense, or I mean, he's still in Tampa, but Zach Robinson comes to him. And Zach Robinson has been dealt a really shitty hand in terms of Michael Penix and Kirk Cousins. And we talked about this with Ryan Heath, but Zach Robinson in this during snap motion rate chart, he is up there behind only Mike McDaniel. And on these kinds of plays with during snap motion, Baker Mayfield is second behind only CJ Stroud and an increase in his adjusted net yards per attempt. So this is a really strong marriage of Zach Robinson and Baker Mayfield. I think that the whole offense takes a step forward here and bounces back. And then you also have the narrative of Zach Robinson was on the Rams staff with Cooper Kupp. And we're already getting reports from Zach Robinson saying he's very similar to a Cooper Kupp just in terms of the way that his brain works with the game of football and natural instincts. I'm not saying that Ibuka is going to be Cooper Kupp, but there's so much upside here. I think that when everybody's healthy, Ibuka has like the floor of being a top 24 guy, and then has a ceiling of being who we saw through 5 weeks, where it was like, okay, is this guy going to be in Jefferson Chase conversations? I know that that's crazy to say right now, way removed from what happened, but through 5 weeks, that's what it was looking like. I know that 30-year-old Chris Godwin is there. There's also something to be said that Matt Harmon's been harping on this. Zach Robinson keeps saying that Godwin likely is going to take the slot role, and then X is going to probably be Jalen McMillan or Ted Hurst, and then Ibuka is going to be this off-the-line Z, which is really awesome. Last year, he kind of got typecasted to play the X, especially when Mike Evans went out. X is going to be on the boundary, playing against press man coverage. Ibuka in college was really more of a slot flanker receiver, playing out of position last year as a rookie. It seems like this year he will be playing his natural position of off-the-line Z, flanker, slot, sort of like rotation receiver, which I think is going to really help him this year. Then my fourth player, moving up the rankings, Cam Scatterbo. Goes from my 506 to my 409. I moved him up 9 spots. Now, this is the only one you can point at and be like, I guess that I moved him up because of positive injury news, but really, and something that I pride myself on, is that I will never sit down to write a video, and if I have a player in mind, and I'm like, well, let's make Cam Scatterbo a guy that I'm fading this year. And then if I start to write his profile out, and I'm like, maybe I shouldn't be fading this guy, then I'm not going to keep him in the video. I'm going to just change and find somebody else. So I never force a player into a video just to say, oh, well, we got to get 5 fades out today. So I started writing up Cam Scatterbo, and I was like, I don't think I could have him in a do not draft video. I think that he's probably accurately priced. Now, I'm still behind the market, but he's not someone I'm going to be fully fading. As you guys know, I loved Cam Scatterbo last year. It was absolutely heart-wrenching when he got hurt. He was somebody that was smashing for us as like a 10th round pick. Now, what really concerns me is that he had pretty much a broken ankle that was pointed 90 degrees, and he got a tightrope surgery, as Dwayne McFarland outlines here, which has been unkind to a lot of players. Godwin, Mark Andrews, Tony Pollard, Cooper Kupp, all had down years coming off of the tightrope surgery. I guess Cooper Kupp, not so much, but everybody else absolutely zapped. But we're already getting positive news that he's going to be full go for training camp. He's going to be full go for week 1. Maybe he loses some effectiveness, right? Maybe he's not as good as he once was. Maybe he starts slower. Maybe he has re-injury risk, but it all feels pretty baked in. Something I've been doing, and you'll definitely see this more in upcoming videos, is I've been aggregating my favorite ranking sources. This is from Mike Clay over at ESPN, Rich Rebar over at Sharp Football Analysis, and Dwayne McFarland over at Fantasy Life. This is the half PPR projections across all three put into an average, and then you have every single running back getting drafted in the top 50 over on Underdog. You can see Kyron, Javonte, and ETN, right? This is a range of running backs getting drafted in the, pick 30 to 36. So we're talking like mid to late third. Scadabo's in that same range, right around 12 points per game is his projection, getting drafted at pick 43. So you're already getting like a 10-pick discount, like a round discount on Cam Scadabo. I imagine his projection here is even kind of impacted by the injury. We're already getting a lot of things baked in that in the fourth round, he's probably a fair pick, right? His ADP is 43. 409 would be 36 plus 9. 45. So I'm like 2 spots lower than ADP, but it's tough to be much lower than that. It just seems very fair. The injury's already baked in. And when we're drafting a guy like Cam Scadabo, it's for this role on a Giants offense that is like fringe top 20 in projected points, fringe top 20 in offensive line. Of course, Andrew Thomas is an absolute monster. And when we're looking for running back scoring, we want goal line role and receiving. Last year, in 5 games where he played over half the snaps, he had 100% of the backfield inside the 5 or inside the 10 carries, not even inside the 5, inside the 10 carries, and a 15.1% target share, RB5. He averaged 20 points per game over that span from Ryan Heath. If he has that role, even if he's not as effective, that 20 points per game goes down to like 15. He's still a huge hit at his ADP. Yes, there's downside of injury, but he's just somebody I have to move up just given what his role is and how well he's going to project in that role. Then our 5th player moving up the ranks is going to be David Montgomery. And I'll give you another one. He was next to Scadabo. It was him and Scadabo in that fade video. And then I started writing up David Montgomery, and I'm like, ugh. I don't think I can fully fade David Montgomery. Now, he is somebody that you would think on the surface, this is a dead zone back, right? This is somebody that is projected for high volume on a mid-Houston Texans offense. He goes from the Lions to the Texans, and he's just kind of the classic, okay, he's going to be the RB1 in a new situation, give him all the projected volume, dead zone back. Well, he's not that expensive. Like 5th round seems pretty reasonable for him. This is somebody that you can go, let's say you go Gibbs in round 1, right? 1, 2, 3. Yeah, you go Gibbs in round 1, and then Montgomery could be your RB2 in the beginning of round 5, end of round 4. And to me, that seems pretty reasonable. I moved him up from my 510 to my 503. I moved him up 7 spots here. The peripherals aren't great, right? Houston is projected for the 19th most points, isn't bad, but the 28th offensive line. But I would say that was a similar spot for Joe Mixon. Joe Mixon was never all that efficient over on the Bengals. He goes from the Bengals to the Texans. And then in that year, he was amazing. He was at like 18 points per game, 17 points per game. And Zane Donani outlines it here, kind of showing what Joe Mixon's role was in 2024. 80% plus of the rushing attempts, of the running back targets, the opportunity share. He was a monster, essentially saying that all of those opportunity-based metrics, he was first or second. They would be first or second in most NFL seasons. Yes, Woody Marks is there. Mixon had Dario Ogunbowale. Maybe Woody Marks is a little bit better, but still, Woody Marks is a day 3 pick. Last year, his efficiency was pretty brutal. I'm not really holding my breath that Woody Marks is going to be anything. And I think if you want to go a little bit deeper, this is more of like a narrative style play where I just think DeMeco Ryans, after seeing what CJ Stroud was down the stretch last year and kind of what they were getting from Nick Chubb and Woody Marks and just like this dysfunctional backfield, I think he just wants to get back to smash mouth football. We have an elite defense. We're going to line up, beat your teeth in, and then run the football down your throat. And that's just what he probably envisions for David Montgomery. So I just think that David Montgomery is going to get all the work. I think you can kind of look at what Joe Mixon did in 2024 and say, well, I think like 18 points per game is probably like the ceiling for David Montgomery, but we saw with Joe Mixon in a role where the offense wasn't spectacular. Joe Mixon wasn't catching a ton of passes. He was just getting all the volume, all the touches, all the goal line work. And I think that we're going to see that for David Montgomery. He's also an underrated talent where in 2020, he was the RB6 at 17.7 points per game on the Bears. He had 50-plus catches in that season. I think he's an underrated receiver as well. He had 2.24 yards per out run in 2024 on the line. So not last year, the year before that. 2.24 yards per out run on a 30-plus catch season is pretty absurd for a running back. And not only that, he was behind only Amon-Ra St. Brown among Lions pass catchers. So Jameson Williams, a yards per out run demon. Laporta was there. Gibbs was there. really crazy. So I do think that David Montgomery, like they traded for him to be their guy. I think they're going to run it till the wheels fall off in year one, figure it out later. I think that he's somebody that you can draft in round 5, round 4, kind of similar to, I'm trying to think of this reminds me, it's of course like different. Like this isn't somebody going from a new team, but Josh Jacobs on the Raiders in like 2022 was a very similar profile to this, where like he wasn't super sexy. You were drafting him like somewhere between like 5th and 7th round. He got all the touches. He was really good that year. I can see that for David Montgomery. Then another one, we have Parker Washington. This is one that would be a very classic me not liking this player. I moved him from my 707 to my 605, up 14 spots. Now, even Dwayne says here that he's not pronouncing this as some in-depth study that he believes 100%, but what I'm saying is I think an old me would say, oh, well, Parker Washington was a flash in the pan, and you can kind of look back at other flash in the pans like Travis Fulgham and Hunter Renfro's listed here, Rashard Matthews, Marquise Goodwin, Marcus Wheaton, Russell Gage, Jawan Jennings, these guys who are day 3 picks and just kind of pop off the second half of a season. But with Parker Washington, I'm not as willing to say that it was a fluke. This is somebody that was a day 3 pick, but an analytical darling day 3 pick out of Penn State, was an early declare. And as much as I love Brian Thomas Jr., I think a bounce back is coming for Brian Thomas Jr., there's also a situation where Parker Washington is just now the best receiver on this team. As crazy as it is to say out loud, this is a Jaguars team that, unlike Michael Wilson, right? Michael Wilson now has a whole new coaching staff he needs to prove his worth to. Parker Washington is still with Liam Cohen. Liam Cohen saw how dominant Parker Washington was down the stretch of the season. I think that is going to carry over. Also, instead of Michael Wilson, where there's this unsustainable passing volume and Jacoby Brissett issue on the Jaguars, this is one of the better passing offenses in the league. They were 6th in points scored last year. I love Trevor Lawrence. I love Liam Cohen. I want pieces of this passing offense, and I'm not willing to overlook Parker Washington. If we look at these 6 games where all of these players played together, Parker Washington, Jacoby Myers, Bretton Strange, and Brian Thomas, we have a decent sample of what we're looking at. Parker Washington looks a lot like Jayden Reed. He looks a lot like, let me actually get this out of the way for you guys. He looks a lot like Jayden Reed and Josh Downs as a part-time receiver. You see up there 67% route share, but the per route metrics are so good that I'm willing to buy in, right? Targets per run kills everybody, 29%. Team percent of receiving yards kills everybody at 33%. Yards per run, 3.53 is nuts. That is a Puka Nacua level number. First read share, 26%. First downs per run, 13.25%. Absurd across the board. Now, he does have a high slot rate, and that's where he kind of gets that Josh Downs comp, that Jayden Reed comp. But even before this stretch, he was rotated on the outside. So I'm optimistic he can play on the outside, in the outside. It really just comes down to who these Jaguars deploy in 2 wide receiver sets, whether that's Brian Thomas and Jacoby Myers, or Brian Thomas and Parker Washington, or Parker Washington and Jacoby Myers. Who knows how that's going to shake out? You're kind of paying to figure out with these Jaguars wide receivers, but this offense is going to be so good, and the passing game is going to be so good. I'm willing to pay to find out with these guys you are drafting as a flex option. So it wouldn't be shocking to me for Parker Washington to have a late career breakout as a day 3 pick. I just don't think you can put the genie back in the bottle with how strong he finished last year. In that 6-game sample, 16.8 points per game, pretty much after the bye week last year. You can expand it to bigger, and he was just nails. He was awesome. And I just don't think you can be like, oh, well, it's not going to carry over. I think it very much is. The beat is already all over him in terms of the local beat reporters. You can take that for whatever you want. I think the key to 2026 fantasy football is going to be predicting how this receiver room shakes out. I'm probably going to be putting most of my chips on Parker Washington and Brian Thomas, and I think Jacoby Myers will be the guy that I'm not drafting very much of, but I could see any of these guys being league winners. Even Travis Hunter late, I'm sprinkling in best ball. And then the last player moving up the rankings is Xavier Worthy. He goes from my 903 to my 804. He gets moved up 11 spots, and this one isn't anything profound. This is very simply, we look at fantasy breakouts by career year. Year 3 is the year. Now, I will say, you do see year 2 is still pretty high there when it comes to the Emeka Egbuka stuff, or Emeka Egbuka. I don't know why I'm struggling all over the place, but we have this with Xavier Worthy, a year 3 breakout candidate attached to Patrick Mahomes. You can kind of explain away his down year 2. We have this from Adam Levitan highlighting that the Chiefs didn't add help in free agency at wide receiver. They didn't draft a wide receiver until round 5, Cyrus Allen, who's like a fun late round dart throw. But essentially, the Chiefs kind of gave Xavier Worthy a stamp of approval that we're going to ride with him in year 3. We spend a first-round pick on him. This article that he's highlighting here says the team limited Worthy's routes a year ago to protect him after his Game 1 labrum injury. I would tell you that we kind of after that, we were afraid to do certain things with Worthy, Reed said, so I think him coming back healthy, I think opens up that whole picture you saw during training camp. We had a whole bunch of different routes in there. Then on top of that, I hate to go crazy with this. He won the OTA MVP for whatever that is worth, but I think that you can kind of just explain away his year 2. You can say year 3 breakout, clean slate. He'll have plenty of opportunity on a Chiefs offense attached with Patrick Mahomes, and there's something to cling on to in the NFL, right? There's other guys in the same draft class you can't really do that with, right? Whether that's like Xavier Legette or Keon Coleman, but you can cling on to a Xavier Worthy. You have this stretch from his last 7 games of 2024 to 2025. So it's essentially like the last couple games of the regular season, the playoff run, and then the Super Bowl loss to the Eagles. He was at 2.28 yards per out run, 24% targets per out run, 11.5% first downs per out run, 84.3 PFF grade, with a 21.6 point per game total over that span. I'm not saying that's what he's going to be. I'm just saying that there is some upside. He has already showed enough to then bet on him again. So Xavier Worthy is somebody I want to be drafting this season, but that is 7 players that, yes, some of them have new news coming out or injury optimism, but for a lot of them, it's just that I've been doing drafts. I haven't been drafting enough of these guys. I've been doing a little bit more research here and there and just saying, these are guys I got to move up. I need to be drafting more of them. I need to be ahead of market on them. 7 players, moving up the rankings for this 2026 season. As always, if you enjoy, leave a like, subscribe if you're new. Get the entire rankings over at Patreon, patreon.com/Ron Stewart. Get my rankings. You can upload them to Underdog for yourself to then draft on there. But if not, appreciate y'all for watching, and I will see y'all in the next one.